Let's go. Batter up. We're taking the afternoon off. It's a beautiful day for a ball game. For a ball game today. The fans are out to get a ticket or two. From Walla, Washington to Kalamazoo. It's a beautiful day.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's edition of Inside Pitch with me, Joe Mansolino, and my co-host / producer, Mr. Brian Lehman. Brian, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Joe?
Doing good. Really looking forward to tonight's guest. It's a great Jerry Royce, super left-handed pitcher, 22 years in the big leagues. Just a knowledgeable guy, great guy, lots of information. It's going to be a good show with Jerry on here tonight.
I bet it's going to be a show with about 713 questions.
It's good. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Let's talk about a little bit about baseball, though. What do you think?
I don't know. What's the name of this show?
Inside Pitch.
Oh, I guess it has to be baseball. Okay. We're good.
Yes, it does. Anything
says-
about what's going on this week?
Well, lots of entertaining things. You know, every time I turn on a game, it seems like somebody's getting pissed off at somebody else.
It kind of seems that way. It does kind of seem that way. There's lots of emotion running high and dry. Some of the teams, lots of those teams, already know that they're playing for next year's positions, and they're totally out of it. But when you're in that position, a lot of them take pride in the fact that they could bump somebody else out and just still have some relevance in this thing. So let's hope that all of them are feeling that way.
Good point. And what's amazing is to watch all those fans show up to the game dressed up as empty seats. It is impressive.
There has been a lot of those, and unfortunately with ticket prices and those kind of things, I think you're going to see that. But there's some teams that always draw. Yankees always are packed. The Dodger Stadium is always packed. Those could be the two teams in the World Series this year. I know the Houston Astros are going to have a big argument about that, and rightfully so. I mean, they are just a great team, playing well. It's going to be a good playoff series, I think.
So who are your favorites going into the playoffs?
It's going to be interesting. I think the Dodgers will win the National League for the third time in a row. And I think it's going to be a tough one between the Yankees and the Astros. And you can't count out Minnesota. Minnesota's playing well. Believe it or not, the Indians are right there too, playing behind them. I mean, it's going to be tough in the American League to win it. They're going to have to really focus and come down to some really good baseball. These last few weeks in September are going to be exciting.
Gosh, picture that. Exciting baseball.
Isn't that fun? That's what it's all about. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on. In the National League East, the Braves are in first place, followed by the Nationals. The Phillies and the Mets are right there battling for fourth, and the Miami Marlins are pulling up the rear in that division.
You're saying they're MIA?
They are MIA. In the Central Division of the National League, the Cardinals and the Cubs are fighting with each other to be there, and the Milwaukee Brewers are pretty close in it too. That's going to be a good three-way race going down to the end, followed by the Cincinnati Reds and the Pittsburgh Pirates. In the West, the Dodgers are in first by a lot, followed by the Giants and the Diamondbacks, who are fighting each other for second, followed by the Padres, and then the Rockies pulling up the rear in that division. And then we go to the American League, where the Yankees are in first place and scoring lots of runs and doing what the Yankees do. Pitching is their problem. Followed by Tampa, the Boston Red Sox, and then way out are the Toronto Blue Jays and the Baltimore Orioles. In the American League Central, the Minnesota Twins are right in there with Cleveland Indians fighting for that spot, followed by the Chicago White Sox, and then the Kansas City Royals and the Detroit Tigers are pulling up the rear in that division. And in the American League West, It's those Houston Astros, who are just a great team, fun team to watch, followed by the Oakland A's, the Texas Rangers, the California Angels, and the Seattle Mariners are in there pulling up the rear. So, lots of good races. It's going to come down to, I think, great playoffs and a great World Series this year. You know, some of the teams are just going to be on fire. Others going into this last week of the season are not staying as focused, and or they're getting tired. They're not playing as well as they need to be playing. So it's going to be fun watching it come down to the playoffs and seeing what happens. Anybody could beat anybody on a given day.
Good point. What's funny is this season seems to have flown by.
This season has flown by.
Of course, I guess that could be because it's summer and, the boys of summer and all that, but this season just seemed to have gone quicker than most.
It really has. I got to agree with that. It's been very interesting.
I had a Braves fan ask me the other day they wanted me to ask you what you think their chances are in the playoffs.
I think the Braves have a really good team. I mean, they're playing good baseball. I really wish that they had done what they're doing now, earlier, like when they first moved to the stadium. I think the fans deserve that. But the fans have to be happy now. I don't think you can count the Braves out of it.
You think their biggest problem is their bullpen?
I do, and I think what's going to happen, and what happens with a lot of teams right now, is their lack of experience in postseason play. I think that'll hurt them this year, but will help them ultimately as a team for next year and years coming up.
Good point.
But they're a great young team. They're going to be tough for years and years to come.
Yeah, I've got some friends that are going up to the game, and hope they're supposed to be listening to the show tonight. So I hope you guys have fun while you're up that way. Of course, they're going up there to do a bunch of other work while there, but then they're going to catch a game or two.
Hey, there's nothing like when you're away somewhere and working and catching a ball game just to relax at the end of a day or the end of a trip. There's nothing like it. It's a lot of fun.
Good point.
It is a lot of fun. Well, we are going to have Jerry Royce on tonight. Fabulous guy. We'll go over his stats in a minute. Let's get Jerry on the phone.
Hang on one second.
Hi, we have Jerry Royce on the line, and before I start talking to Jerry, let me give you a little bit about his background. He was so successful, he played 22 years in the major leagues. He was a second-round pick in the free agent draft in 1969 for the St. Louis Cardinals. He then played for the Houston Astros, Pittsburgh Pirates, Los Angeles Dodgers, the Cincinnati Reds, California Angels, Chicago White Sox, Milwaukee Brewers, and back to the Pittsburgh Pirates in his 22-year career. He accumulated a record of 220 wins and 191 losses with a 3.64 ERA and 1,907 strikeouts. He was a National League All-Star in 1975, and in 1980, he threw a no-hitter against the San Francisco Giants when he was with the Dodgers on June 27th, 1980, a very impressive feat, and he has a ring from the World Championship in 1981. Ladies and gentlemen, the great left-hander Jerry Royce. Jerry, how are you today?
Hi, Joe. Happy Tuesday to you. Hope everything's going well.
Everything is going great. Thank you. How about you?
Well, no complaints. I'm up this morning, ready to talk to you, and then later in the week, we've got some baseball games coming up here in Las Vegas as the Aviators have a chance to win their division and go on to the postseason in the first year of their affiliation with the Oakland A's. So it's an exciting baseball time in the area where I live.
That's outstanding. Why don't you share that with people who don't know what you're doing now, what you're up to with them?
Well, for the last, I guess, 15 years, I've done an abbreviated schedule with a derivation of the Aviators. It was the Las Vegas 51s, and I did a number of games for them every year. And so it got up to about 20, 25. And then with the move to a new ballpark, there was a new affiliation with the Oakland A's. And it's been a good one so far because in Las Vegas, they are drawing at record numbers. They've far surpassed the previous high as far as attendance. And if I'm not mistaken, they lead the minor leagues in attendance per game and aggregate. So it's an exciting time for baseball in Las Vegas and, well, and AAA baseball with the prospects of going into the postseason.
That's exciting. That really is exciting. There's just something special about minor league baseball.
Well, there is, in a sense. It's not Major League Baseball, which is played at a different kind of level, but it's more local, and it also, in many cases, allows the fans to get a bit closer to the players. And in nearly every case, you see a lot of these guys before they go on to be stars in the major leagues.
Very true. Very true. And a lot of times you're lucky enough to see somebody, a star on a rehab assignment, and that's always exciting for the fans.
I'm glad that baseball instituted that idea. When I played, I don't think there was anything that allowed a player to go to the minor leagues and on rehabilitation, getting themselves back in major league condition for the remainder of the season. So I think that's one of the smartest moves that baseball's ever made, and it's a win-win for the player, for the organization, and for the fans.
I agree. I agree a lot, and congratulations on having that job. I know, times when we'd see you doing ESPN and things, you're just great at what you do. It's got to be fun for the fans to hear you and see you, and it's got to be fun for you.
Well, as I tell everybody, it's the second best job I ever had, followed only by being a player. When I talk about it when I visit with people and when I have speeches or in personal appearances, is that for me, I was so fortunate, so blessed to live many people's dreams. I was like so many other kids growing up in the mid 50s through the 60s and having the dream of playing professional baseball, but many fell by the wayside. I kept the dream alive for myself and went on to have a very long career. So if that's not living a dream, well, I don't know what is.
Well, it is living a dream, but it's also living a dream with talent and hard work and dedication. So,
well, yeah, you're right about that. There's a lot to be said for the talent, but it takes a village to raise an athlete because there are a number of people who, in one way or another, either directly or indirectly, supported me and other athletes that allowed me to take every step forward and ultimately live the dream. They're the parents who supplied the baseballs and bats. There are others who worked on the fields. There were others who put time into getting the schedules together. And then, of course, playing in high school ball, there are the coaches and the board of educators that put together a very good program. And then the American Legion, a lot can be said for them.
Boy,
about
sure.
Their support with baseball. And then once I was fortunate enough to sign a professional contract, there were coaches, trainers, other players, and other people maybe in the background who at one point or another supported me and got me in the direction that I wanted to go as far as living that dream. So, like I said, it takes a village.
And I commend you for saying that because I don't think there's very many players who, and I'm sure it's not intentionally, who don't realize that all those people in some way or another really do have, even though it's a small part, have a small part in helping you get along. I think that's great. I commend you for that.
Well, thank you. I do think players have an appreciation for that, but during the course of a season, you're playing the games and your focus has to be on being the best that you can be that particular night when the game time begins. So you lose focus of all that's going around you, and you have to have that very narrow element of focus in order to, well, continue to play on a daily basis at a very high level.
I agree. I agree. And on that, I'm going to start asking you some questions. And here's one that you and I have talked about.
Yeah.
Do you hold any records or asterisks in the books that people may not know?
Yeah, I'm glad you say asterisk. I know we talked about it yesterday because there's no other way, to say it. Well, the first one would be, and this came in your opening when you talked about the fact that I played 22 years and was a 4-decade player. Now, there have only been 29 players who have played in the major leagues for 4 decades, and only one that played in 5 decades. So you know there's going to be a trivia question, don't you?
Mr. Minoso was amazing.
See, there you go. So you're 1 for 1 early on a Tuesday morning. How about that? Well, that's one asterisk. The other, playing with a number of different teams. There was one, and I read it recently, although I don't remember the details, about the number of wins that I had on artificial turf. Of course, I came along in an era when a predominant number of teams, their stadiums had artificial surface. So
Right.
Playing for a long period of time, you accumulate some wins. I don't know where I stand all time on that list, but my name was mentioned, and I just smiled at that, and I said, put it on the list.
There's another asterisk.
There's another one. How about winning 2 games in one day? That's an asterisk. That happened in 1982, just about, let's see, the August 17th and 18th, depending on when one wants to say which game was won. I finished a suspended game at Wrigley Field because back in those days, there were no lights.
Right.
So I pitched 4 innings in that game, and we squeezed in a run. I held it and got the win in that game, and also pitched the first 5 innings of the next game, and the Dodgers put some runs on the board, and a trio of relievers came in and held it down, and that allowed me to win 2 games in one day.
Wow,
So,
that's very
yeah.
impressive.
Well, then there was the game, and I don't know the year. I think it was '82 in Dodger Stadium when I pitched against Cincinnati. Eddie Milner, the leadoff hitter, doubled to left center, advanced on a ground ball, and scored on a sacrifice fly. But after Milner got that double, I retired the next 27 batters in order.
Wow.
Put it on the list.
Wow. There's 3.
There's 3, and we
awesome.
could use the whole show as I sit here recalling all of these things, but that just gives you some kind of idea that as a professional player, if you stick around long enough, a couple of instances are going to come along that only you can call your own, and the only way that you can really discover what they're all about is to put them on a list of asterisk.
and I know when we talked earlier, there's another asterisk that you have. I think
there
deals
go
with
ahead.
713.
Oh yeah, that's a communication with Al Downing. In 1973, I gave up the last home run that Henry Aaron hit in that season, and it was number 713. He blasted 714 off of Jack Billingham and broke Babe Ruth's record with a home run off of Al Downing, number 715. So at a recent appearance, Al and I were there. I went up to him. I said, 715, great to see you. He looked at me, smiled, and he said, 713? I said, that's it. Well, from 713 to 715, that's how we refer to one another.
That's funny. I left him a message last night, and I said, oh, and by the way, 713 said to tail 715 hello, so he'll be calling me today.
Oh, yeah, and I know he had a big smile about that because he loves it. If you have to live, and I guess it's an infamy, you're proud of the fact that you were a part of baseball history, but when you're on the wrong end of it, it's one of those things where, it's a double-edged sword. You like the fact that people remember your name, but not in the context of being on the wrong side or the non-winning side of a situation. But Al has handled it and handled it with dignity and class.
He really has, and I love his answer. He and I have been good friends for over 40 years. And when people ask him, and like, just, how does it feel, this and that, and he said, it feels fine because he hit 714 of them before me.
Yeah.
And that's the way you have to look at it.
Sure. What,
Yeah.
really, what else can you do? And you just smile, and when people bring it up, you look at them, you shake their hand and say, hey, thanks for remembering.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And then when I shake your hand the next time, I'm going to say, hey, 713.
Yeah. There you go.
I love that. That one is just classic. All right, here goes. Who were the most challenging hitters that you faced?
Nobody was easy. None of them were easy. I was fortunate that a lot of the great hitters, they hit the ball hard, but they hit them right at somebody. And Pete Rose is the first to come to mind. Uh, I don't know the numbers as they appear. And if anybody who is listening to this want to know, go to retrosheet.org and you'll find a way to work your way through the website to find the records of nearly everybody who played Major League Baseball. And within their bio, you'll see pitcher batter matchups. And you get a pretty good idea of lifetime how someone did against you. I went on there after I met the website's creator, David Smith, out of Washington, D.C., and I was surprised that I did well against some Hall of Famers and others just tore me up. And then there were some people of lesser renown that had no success against me, and others that they looked like Hall of Famers if they could take those numbers against other pitchers. So, as I said, there were no easy outs. The great hitters were great hitters against me. It's just that probably it was proportional. It swung to my favor just a bit. So that's really the best way that I can answer it.
I appreciate that. And you played with some great players in a great era with numerous Hall of Fame players in your career, both with you and against you. Who would you say are some of the best players that you saw in both the American League and then the National League?
Yeah, but before I get into that, you have to context this just a little bit. Remember, back in those days, there was a lot of artificial turf. That was also the introduction of knit uniforms. By this time, the lowering of the mound in 1969 had already taken effect throughout baseball.
Right.
The designated hitter came on board in 1973. So we're providing a little bit of a backdrop and giving a little context to the way the game was played back then. The best ball player that I had ever seen for a couple of years was Dave Parker. I had never seen, I thought Cesar Cedeno was going to be the best because of the way he played center field.
Yeah.
But he had a lot of stolen bases. He hit for average. He could hit better than 20 home runs a season. If he stayed healthy, he was going to have right around 100 RBIs and over 50 stolen bases. So that's about as complete player as you'd ever want to see. Joe Morgan also fit into that mold as a great ball player, but he didn't have the same kind of defensive acumen that Cesar did playing center field. I know it's comparing apples and oranges, but it's just my thought. But Dave Parker topped them all because Dave could hit for average. He could hit for power. He could steal a base. He played an outstanding right field and was a perennial all-star during the mid-'80s. And in the seasons of 77 and 78, he was just off the boards outstanding. And I didn't see him that much in 79 because I was traded to the Dodgers. But for those 2 years, I'd have to say he was the best that I had seen. Now, keep in mind, I did play against Henry Aaron. We did talk about that. But I caught Aaron at the end of his career, just like I did Roberto Clemente and a couple of other great ones. I didn't see Johnny Bench on a regular basis, but Johnny Bench was one of the best that I had seen. Mike Schmidt, you could put him in that category as well.
Boy, that's for
So,
sure.
yeah, there's a lot of great ones.
There was a lot of great ones, and that just had to be a thrill because as they came up to the plate, you knew how great they were, and you knew you could get them out. I mean, that's just that's the difference between, like what you were saying, the people who never made it and the people who did. You guys have the fortitude of we can do this.
Well, for me, every time somebody came to the plate, I had my focus so narrow, and my concern was, what can I do with this next pitch to produce an out? If I didn't produce an out on that pitch, I took what I learned and in the next pitch tried to find a way to get him out then. That's the only focus that I had during every ball game, and I tried not to get out over the skis, to borrow a phrase from another sport. So it was just one pitch at a time, trying to find a way to get outs, and that was pretty much the same focus I had over 22 years.
And it obviously worked.
It
What's
worked
some of
well
your
enough, I'll say
most
that.
memorable moments?
Wow. And this is in no particular order. I'll give you, I probably can give you a five right off the top.
Wow.
Winning the World Series in 1981, winning Game 5 of the World Series at Dodger Stadium to give the Dodgers a 3-2 games lead in that series. Of course, the no hitter has to be factored in.
Oh yeah.
First day in the big leagues, growing up in St. Louis and having that first day in the big leagues with the Cardinals, 27 months after I graduated from high school. That was a pretty big moment.
I would say.
And then on the back end, the final game I pitched, it was one of those things where the manager of the Pirates, Jim Leyland, asked if I'd like to start the final game of the season after I told him I was going to retire at the end of the year. So coming off the field to a standing ovation to finish my career is probably the best way that you could do it. I know for me it was an honor, and considering the fact that some of the greatest ball players who ever played had a rather unceremonious finish to their career, that was truly an honor and a great way to cap 22 years. So that's five.
That is five. And that's
That's
very
five. That covers it.
impressive of him to give you that opportunity. That's a class act right there.
Well, no doubt about it. He didn't have to do it. The game didn't mean anything because the Pirates had already clinched their division, and Jim had 3 days to get everything together as far as his pitching and still get his players enough playing time and some rest before the postseason began. So, it was a balancing act on his part, but that's what a manager does every day anyway.
And that's true. That's true, especially back in those days before analytics.
Yeah, when that was? That was 29 years ago.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
yeah, there we go. Again, context. I played 22, and we're talking about an event that happened 29.
And I'm going to tell you that it happened 3 weeks ago. you know, and then
In some way, in my mind, I can draw a tangent to that, and it's almost like reaching out and closing a door because it was so close and left such an impact with me. I do have the video of it, and when I was promoting my book some years ago, I had a number of video clips that I put together and was able to show them the people who attended the places where I was speaking, and they had a chance to not only hear about it, but to see it as well. So when you see it, it leaves a different kind of impact with I guess, the fans, and they can respond to it differently, much like I did.
Sure, I'm sure that's still goosebumps moment. I mean, just hearing about it and that you have it on tape and be able to watch. That's just a goosebump kind of moment. Good for you.
Yeah, it is. I have it. I think it's on Facebook. I think somebody probably pirated it from my place on Flickr, but I know I've linked it a couple of years so that it relates to one of those titles that said on this day in 1990, and then you can click it and then watch the video.
That's really cool. That's really
Yeah, well,
cool.
it's technology. That's fun.
It is fun. All right, let's talk fun. What's the funniest thing you ever saw on the field?
Wow. Boy, there were a whole lot of meetings on the mound that were pretty funny. That's for
People
sure.
would love to hear. Why don't you say some of the funny things that happened? Because I know it isn't always baseball that they're talking about out there.
Well, I tend to refer to those moments as sermons on the mound. and, and probably one that's first and foremost that was so profound that it led to the naming of my book. It was in a game in Los Angeles. Steve Yeager was the catcher. Of course, Tom Lasorda the manager, and it was one of those innings where the wheels fell off the wagon. But I still knew that I had a chance to win the ball game and that there was enough left in the tank. So when Lasorda took that first step out of the dugout, I knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to take me out of the game. So I caught him before he caught me when he got to the mound. And I told him, and I said, just listen to what I have to say. I can tell by the way you walked out here that you wanted to take me out of this ball game, but I want to stay in this ball game. So why don't we do this? Why don't we do the Democratic thing and we'll take a vote? He said, take a vote. And I said, yeah, you'll vote, I'll vote, and so will Steve Yeager, and let him have a say-so in this. And to my surprise, Lasorda said, all right, we'll do that. Well, by this time, Yeager had made it out. He had his mask on. He's listening to the conversation. So Lasorda turns to him and he said he wants to have a vote. He wants to stay in. I want to take him out. You're going to cast the deciding vote. What do you think? Yeager pulled off his mask. He looked at Lasorda. He looked up at me, looked back at Lasorda, and he said, you should have taken him out 2 innings ago. So that was the last time I asked for a vote. So I gave the ball to Lasorda, and as I'm walking off the mound heading toward the dugout, the home plate umpire finally had a chance to ask Lasorda, so Tommy, what do you do? He said to him, I'm going to bring in the right-hander. So I remembered that conversation, and that is the title of my book, Bring in the Right-Hander.
Oh, that's classic. I'm surprised you gave the ball to Tommy and you didn't throw it at Yeager for voting against you.
No, what do you do in a situation like that?
That's a great response, though. I really that's funny.
Yeah. Then there was a time in the 1980 All-Star Game, and one thing that's significant about the 80 All-Star Game was the fact that an in-stadium television was used for the first time.
Oh, and, wow.
Yeah, they called it Diamond Vision. Of course, now it's a lot of minor league ballparks have TVs within the stadium so that fans can see replays, and it makes it more of an experience than what it used to be. But it was first introduced at Dodger Stadium.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I come into the ball game in the 5th inning, and I was told by ABC, who carried the ball game, they said if you can give us about 10 seconds before you pitch, we want to play a clip of the no-hitter that you had just thrown 8 or 10 days ago. And I said, yeah, we can do that. So I looked around the infield for a friendly face, and I saw Phil Garner, who was a teammate with the Pirates.
Right.
So I called him over, and I said, you ever see anything like that TV? And he goes, no. And I said, I'd have to build a new house in order to have a TV like that. And he said, so would I. And I said, that's a pretty good picture. And he says, yeah, but he says, what's this all about? And I said, right now, there are about 50 or 60 million people watching on TV for the All-Star Game. There might be another 25 million people listening on the radio. And we got a solid crowd here at Dodger Stadium of 56,000. He goes, well, yeah, what about it? And I said, right now, don't you think all of them are wondering what we're talking about? They think we're talking about how to get the American League out, but we're standing here talking about televisions. Anyway, it was a pretty good meeting. As it turned out, I struck out the side in the only inning that I pitched. The National League got a couple of runs on the board as we took the lead and held the lead. So in that ball game, with that conversation, I ended up being the winning pitcher in the 1980 All-Star Game.
That is fun. And Garner didn't tell everyone, oh, yeah, I gave him some advice, and that's how he did it.
Well, I was imagining that they were saying either on radio and TV or even both. Garner had played in the American League. That's why he's having this extended conversation with Garner.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah, and nothing could be further from the truth. So when you hear the announcers on TV or listen to them on radio and trying to guess what's going on, usually it's just that, a guess. And at best, you figure this is what the strategy should be, but the conversations usually end up so far from that it's worth mentioning as an aside.
I got to tell you, I was at that All-Star Game in 1980, but I don't remember that moment when you two were talking. I don't know why. It has something to do with the HR, maybe. I'm having a problem remembering things.
Well, but what we ought to do, since we had that conversation yesterday, let's bring the listeners into this and let's see what they can do. Yesterday, and I'll tell everybody this, I presented you with a quiz, based on what I found on retrosheet.org. There were 3 major league players whose last name began with the letters HR. Now, you guessed 2 of them, but you've been unable to guess the final one. So let's do this. Let's allow the people who are listening to figure out who those 3 former major league players are. And I'll present the question to them once again. Who were the 3 major league players whose last name began with the letters HR? And before we'll step back, let you chew on that with your morning coffee, and then get back to you and let you know who those 3 people are. Now, let's get back to our interview.
Those of you, just send your answers in. Do not Google it. I didn't do it yet. That's why I only have 2 out of 3. Send your answers to myinsidepitch@gmail.com, and let's see what we can come up with.
Yeah, and if we have a chance, you can read 1 or 2 on the air, and it's always fun to have an audience participation.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, next one. This is going to be a hard one, I think. Who are some of your favorite players or teammates?
You know, boy, there was a lot of guys that I was friends with on each and every team. Guys that I talked to every day or visited with in the outfield. They were there in Pittsburgh, and it usually with the Pirates, it was Bruce Keeson or Jim Rooker or Ken Brett while he was there. Those were the three guys that one time or another I hung out with. Duffy Dyer, the catcher, was another one. He was a roommate. With Houston, there were other pitchers. Ken Forsch comes to mind. Larry Dierker is still a good friend, and we have conversations on occasion. Going back to the Cardinals, it was an older group, so I was with a new group of kids that were coming through at the time, which included Ted Simmons, and then just a little bit later on, it was Keith Hernandez, and Al Rabowski. Al is still with the ball club, and we came up roughly about the same time. But with the Dodgers, because I was there for 8 years, that was longer than any stop that I had. Steve Garvey and I would have dinner after ball games, and Jay Johnstone, while he was there, made us a trio, and we went out and explored the best dining we possibly could find in a given city when the opportunity presented itself. So there was always somebody that I considered good friends, and then there were other players who they weren't necessarily people that I saw on a social basis, but I saw them every day at the ballpark, and they were classy kind of people. And that would include Willie Stargell with the Pirates, and of course Lou Brock, who was always friendly to everybody. Sure. And I know I'm going to miss a whole bunch of guys. Robin Yount was a first-class individual when I was with Milwaukee. Some of the people that I thought were outstanding also included managers, as well as former teammates. Jim Fregosi comes to mind. Jeff Torborg was another. So you put all of those different people together. Red Schoendienst and Danny Murtaugh, I thought were simply outstanding as far as individuals. And over the years, my stature and view of both of them have grown simply because when I compare them with other managers, not only of their time, but with also previous times and current times, you can just see how well they fit in the history of baseball. So that's just a smattering of different people along the way that I've been blessed with the opportunity to work with.
Great names. And one of them, I got to ask you, when you were out to dinner with Mr. Johnstone, did he ever tie you to a chair or anything?
Jay did a whole bunch of crazy things.
He sure did.
Tying me to a chair would be mild.
It would be mild.
First story that comes to mind about Jay about doing crazy things. In the years that I played with the Dodgers, the final weekend series, they had Fan Appreciation Day. And on Fan Appreciation Day, they had a vast array of gifts, all kinds of things to give away. And it started in the first inning when they said, here's our first drawing of gifts. And it would be season tickets, or it would be some sort of promotion.
Cars?
That kind of built up toward the middle of the game.
Right.
They had a car to give away. But what they did is promote Fan Appreciation Day during the month of September, somewhere around the middle of September, fifth inning, the center field gates would open, and a whole bunch of things would drive around the warning track,
Right.
past home plate, and back out to center field. The car that they were giving away was there, plus a big screen TV you might see, camping gear, all kinds of different things, and they were able to get it all the way around. But they also every year gave away a catamaran, and
Right.
that was the
That's
damnedest
true.
thing. Yeah, they gave away a catamaran. One day when those gates opened up and we saw the catamaran come in, there was Johnstone in full uniform riding on top of the catamaran, waving to everybody like he was honored in a parade.
I remember that. I
Yeah,
remember. I was 1 year. I was lucky enough to win one of those big screen TVs.
did you?
I did.
All
I
right.
did. Yeah, it was pretty fun. But yeah, I remember him doing that.
Yeah, with Jay, all kinds of
You
crazy
never
things
knew
would
what he was
happen.
going to do.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Oh man, and sometimes the worst part was that you were wondering what he was going to do.
Yeah, with Jay, there was, we had, I guess it was instituted as a rule that when the national anthem was played, players came out, stood at the top step of the dugout, and honored the playing of the national anthem. This was at the same time that Jay had written his first book. He had a total of three, and he had his first book, and he took opportunities whenever they were presented. As we turned around after the anthem was finished and scanned the crowd, we could see that there was a flurry of activity around someone wearing a Dodger uniform on the walkway in the first deck. And as I stood there, I said, "Is that Jay up there selling copies of his book?" And that's exactly what he was doing.
Temporary insanity.
Yeah, there was nothing temporary about it.
No,
He was up there.
that was
He
just the
was
name
up
of
there.
his book.
That's right. He was up there selling his book and got everything together and got back down on the bench before the first pitch was thrown.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure you remember the time when he came out as Lasorda with a pillow in his jersey.
Oh yeah, he loved to do that in Philadelphia in particular because he played for the Phillies. He knew the Fanatic and the two played off each other,
Right.
much to the displeasure of Lasorda, who and one day Tommy just got tired of it, went out and tackled the Philly Fanatic, and they had a
A
scuffle
little
right there
tussle,
in front of the
yeah.
dugout. Yeah.
Oh man, great memories. Great
Oh
memories.
yeah.
Let's talk a little about today's game. It's, as you know, it's changing dramatically. Um, lots of things are going on. One of the big ones is the one inning pitchers, in and out one inning. What's your position on them?
Well, again, I throw the word context out, and let's go back in history just a little bit. When I broke in the late '60s, there were a lot of comments about how much the game has changed, particularly with pitchers, in the fact that it was a five-man rotation, and even though complete games were important, it was also the establishment of having a closer. Although they didn't call the guy who finished the ball games the closer at the time,
Right.
in a lot of cases it was just who was available, and it wasn't a one-inning pitcher. And during the years that I played, the designated hitter came into use. There was artificial turf, which made the game, to the eyes and minds of those who had watched games in the 30s and the 40s and even in the 50s, that the game had just changed too much as far as they were concerned. The uniforms had changed. The composition of players, according to where they came from, was very important, as a number of great players came from the Latin American countries as well as Mexico.
Right.
So it was just a different kind of game that was played prior to the 60s and 70s. And there were a lot of complaints about it, as people also said, that it was the introduction of free agency and Marvin Miller and players' work stoppages. All of these things, it spelled the death of baseball as far as many were concerned. And you keep that in its context and compare it to the way the game is played today. It's transitioned, and it's become, at least in my mind, more of an event than an actual baseball game because there's a lot going on. I went to, one of the last games I went to, between innings, they had that band that was on that facing of the second deck of Dodger Stadium, and they played commercials. So every second between innings was sold, and there was always something going on with lights or music or something in the stands. So it was an event. And of course, today all the games are televised.
Right.
You don't miss anything. And with networks like ESPN and MLB, they can incorporate graphics visually that make them from something that's abstract into something that's real. So now let's get to your question. What about the one inning pitcher? My feeling is why not? That's just the way the game has transitioned to the way it's played today. I guess the feeling with that is you can have somebody come out there for one inning, get 3 outs, face a minimum of 3 batters, and take the game and transition it from, let's say, the 7th inning to the 8th inning, where somebody else will take over before the closer comes on. Starters are only expected to go 6 innings or 100 pitches in an effort to keep everybody fresh during the course of the season. Of course, the travel is a little bit tougher right now than what it used to be because of interleague play. So it's an entirely different way that the game is played out there today, and the one inning pitcher is just a part of what we see.
I agree, and complete games too. I mean, just the difference that, like in 1977, which to me, was a month or so ago. Jim Palmer and Nolan Ryan had 22 complete games in 1977. 11 other people had 17 or more. And last year, eight pitchers tied with 2 complete games to lead the league.
Yeah, and how do I feel about that? I'm okay with that. That's just the way the game's played today. All managers seem to accept the fact that if you get 6 innings out of a starter, then you pretty much accomplish things. I know that they've kept records of how pitchers perform over the years. They also had pitch limits, pitch counts, although they weren't as foremost as far as making a decision for a manager. But I can also foresee opportunities for managers during the course of a season, and I know that this has happened, where you have somebody that opens a game, goes for a couple of innings, and goes through the lineup once, and then they bring on somebody who is going to go through the lineup twice, maybe even 3 times, and that'll take you to your situations that lead to your closer. It's just another thought, and you could have, let's say, 2 pitchers work in tandem, a right-hander and a left-hander. You get your matchups accordingly, and you could put that together during the course of a season if you have the right kind of pitchers and personnel who will buy into that kind of program.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I know, and Tampa is one of them, where they bring their closer in. They have brought in their closer to pitch the first inning, and then they bring the starter in.
Yeah, it goes against baseball convention, but it may work. If it works and you win ball games as a result of doing it, and you can keep that same kind of thought and have the same kind of pitchers and personnel go out and perform in that capacity, you can win a lot of ball games, which is what the ultimate goal is anyway.
Well, and that's true. And that brings us, I guess, in a roundabout way to analytics. How do you feel about analytics and the use of it in today's game?
I would have liked to have had the analytics right in front of me and had someone who could explain to me why it's important and how it pertained to me, and kept that in my back pocket when I went out to pitch against somebody, a team. I don't know how much it would have factored in, because none of it really is any good unless you can throw pitches where you want. If you could command your arsenal of pitches, then the analytics really come into play. But if you can't throw strikes, you can't get anybody out, you can't do anything with the analytics.
Well, and that's really a good point. And now let's get to a personal thing with you. I know one of your favorite things is music. How did you
Oh,
get
yeah.
into that?
I've always been interested in rock and roll. Ever since I heard the AM radio back in the late 50s and caught what was going on, I said, I really like this. So every chance I'd get, I'd switch to the two AM stations in St. Louis when I was growing up and listen to what they were playing. And I became familiar with the regional hits as well as some of the national things. So it was always something that I enjoyed. And then when compact disc came into play, and living in Los Angeles, I learned how to barter, trade some tickets for some music. And that began my collection of compact discs. And I've just kept on going to the point to where I have a listening group of songs that number right around 5,000, and I have them broken down according to era, so that when I'm at the gym or driving in the car, I can have music and have a vast array of everything that I've ever liked.
That's really awesome. And folks, those of you, if you want to stay tuned with Jerry and see some of his music information, which is classic, I look forward to it as often as he can put it out there. Go to jerryroyce.com. Learn about Jerry and see what he has in music and what he's up to. And as you can tell through today so far, he's a fascinating man.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. You can find it on the website, or if you're on social media, particularly Facebook. Every Monday, I post a story about either an artist or a song of the late 50s, and I take it through the 60s. I do a lot of research. Once I wrote my book and learned how to research on the internet and through the library system here in Las Vegas, which is outstanding, I really got addicted to it and said, let me see what I can do as far as putting together some of these stories behind the great songs of the late 50s and of the 60s. And I do that post every week on Facebook, and I'll continue to do it, I guess, until I run out of songs. But I still have the enthusiasm when I come up with the idea. And I ask myself that first question: is this something worth exploring? What's the story behind this? And as I look into it, if I like it, then I write about it and post it. So there you go as far as that's concerned.
They are
Hey,
some
by the
great
way,
stories.
well, thank you. I'm gonna shift a little bit here. Have you been getting any responses on your quiz?
We have one from a Brian that got, and I don't know if you want to mention the names or not, but of the names that I gave you yesterday, he got the hitter.
Okay, well let's go ahead and reveal that.
Okay,
At least one of them. Go ahead.
his answer was Ken Herbeck, which is exactly correct, and one of the three,
Yep.
and one of the two that I was lucky enough to get right off the bat.
Uh-huh.
And the third one is torture.
Well, let's give the second one so that we can get right down to that final name.
The second one, a great pitcher, just a fun guy to watch. Called the Mad Hungarian, Mr. Al Raboski.
There you go. So the question again: who are the three players whose last name began with the letters HR? Kent Urbeck, who played with Minnesota; Al Rabowski, who played with three different teams that I can remember right off the top: the Cardinals, Kansas City, and Atlanta. And there's one more. So chew on that for just a little bit longer. We'll pay that off. We'll pay that one off after we have another question or two.
Oh man, that just is driving me crazy. Um, let's go back to the beginning of your career, and especially let's go to your very first game and the anxiety that you were feeling, probably the thrill that you were feeling. Share a little bit about that with us.
It was in 1969, September of 1969. Hold on. And the Cardinals were out of the race as the Mets went on to win the National League East and ultimately the World Series. So we were in Montreal and winding down the season. Red Schoendienst, the manager of the Cardinals, wanted to see all of the players who were brought up. So in a series in Montreal, he played most of the kids. And that was when I had my first major league start. It was a cold, rainy Saturday afternoon.
Of course.
And it was doubtful that we were going to play the game, but I guess enough people showed up, and Montreal, being in the league for the first time, wanted to, complete their series and have it against the Cardinals. So I got the Saturday afternoon game. It stopped raining long enough. So we got into about the bottom of the second, maybe the bottom of the third, when I was at bat with the count 2-1, and the rains came on. So they had to shut things down for an hour or so before we went back out. And the rains held for a while until until I got to the seventh inning. So it was a soggy field, a little bit of mud here and there, but we got through it. And that was my first major league game. I went 7 innings, gave up a couple of hits, walked a couple of guys, and the Cardinals held on to win by a score of 2-1.
How exciting! How exciting! And
Yeah,
but being able to keep your focus during that long rain delay too, that's impressive.
What's today, I don't think that would happen, because managers would protect a young player
right,
at
let him come
19
out.
or 20 years old and say, you're not going to get warmed up a second time. We're going to bring somebody else in. But it was a different time and place in 1969, and the expectations for a pitcher is that if you got the start, you were there until you either completed the game or you got knocked out of the game.
Right.
That's the way that Red managed. So it worked for me, and it was fortunate that I stayed in and was able to get that first major league win. And I also got my first major league hit, my first major league RBI. So
wow,
it was
all in your first game.
All in the first game.
That's
so
awesome. That's an asterisk.
There you go. Put it on the board.
Jerry, Mr. Asterisk Royce.
There it is.
That's awesome.
As long as you say, as long as you don't try to shorten that word and make sure you say asterisk, and rather than the beginning with something else at the end, making it a compound word.
It's got to be 3 syllables, not just one. Never one.
That's it. All right.
Never one with you.
Let's pay it off.
Oh, please do.
Let's pay it off.
I can sleep tonight.
Three players, Major League history, whose last name began with the letters HR. Al Hrabowski, Kent Urbeck, and Walt Hriniak.
Oh, Atlanta Braves. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that's him.
That's it.
Oh, outstanding.
As Casey Stengel said, you can look it up.
Oh, that's classic. Jerry, I want to really, really thank you for taking your time, for sharing your wisdom, your humor, your information with us. I want to thank you very, very much. I hope you have the rest of a great day, and I really appreciate you being here, 713.
Yeah, old 713 showed up. One final thing, Joe, for the fans who are listening. If you're interested in more Jerry Royce stories, you can get them on Facebook. I post a lot of pictures on Facebook that have stories. I also have a vast array of pictures of ballparks that no longer exist. They're on my Flickr site. You can find them just by typing my name in. If you're interested in a copy of my book, a signed new copy of my book, go to jerryroyce.com. That's JERRYREUSS.com. And it'll direct you how you can purchase your own personalized copy of my book. So that's the advertising that you have to put up with, Joe, if you're gonna interview me.
I actually, at the very end, I had that in my notes. So thank you very much.
Okay.
I appreciate that. And again, Joe, thank you, Jerry. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Joe, it's been fun. I look forward to the next time we do it. I'll have a fresh quiz for you, and
okay, that scares me.
Yeah, well, we'll see what we can come up with, because there's always some interesting things out there in baseball history, and we'll have an asterisk that you can hang on that quiz.
You got it. Jerry, thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Jerry Royce. Just an awesome man. Awesome player. 22 years in the big leagues. And as you can tell, just one of the nicest guys that you could meet. Just our pleasure to have Jerry on today. Wow. Let's go back to myinsidepitch@gmail.com. We had a message based on last week's show from Larry Rubin. Larry, thank you for writing in and explaining how one of the things we talked about when in the minor leagues they're testing having a runner be at second base in extra innings. Larry was a big umpire in the softball leagues, and he said that is from softball. It's called the International Tiebreaker, and as we discussed last week, the purpose of it is just to speed up the game. I don't like it, but that's the purpose of it. Larry, thank you very much for writing in. The answer for the trivia question, who is the Marlins' all-time leader in Grand Slams, came from a man named David, who answered it. Jeff Conine had it with 6. So, thank you very much for that. This week's question, what shortstop holds a major league record for games played, assists, and double plays? What shortstop holds a major league record for games played, assists, and double plays? Send us your answer to myinsidepitch@gmail.com, and no Googling and cheating. If you know, please just send in your guess. And those of you in the Baldwin County, Alabama area looking for a mortgage information, please call our co-host / producer, Mr. Brian Lehman of USA Mortgage at 251-616-0005. And again, for Jerry Royce, please be sure, go to his page, jerryroyce.com, and get a copy of his book signed with your name on it, and you'll enjoy every minute of it. As you can see, he's just a great man. Brian?
Joe? It's been a lot of fun again.
It's been a lot of fun. Jerry was great. We want to thank you all for listening, and have a great evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.